We want to start off with a reminder that we are not doctors. Before you make any changes or try something new, always consult with your doctor and medical team first. Chronic illness can vary from patient to patient, so it's always best to consult with your own doctor for what is best for you.
Hello and welcome to IBD Determined. Today I'm your host, Mason Harvey, and I have Crohn's disease. I speak from the role of a patient.
And I'm your other host, Michelle Harvey. I'm Mason's mom, and I speak in the role of a caregiver. And today we're going to finally end the series from IBD Day. Yeah. So what happened at Rady's, then we've broken it down to different segments. So this is the final one, and it's going to be kind of like an overview of IBD and the differences kind of with pediatric IBD also as well, which is really
Important to cover.
important. Yeah. So I hope you guys will really listen to this. And that way, sometimes, when you're an adult, maybe you don't understand why a child is being treated differently with this disease than you are. And maybe you only know an adult with this and you want to offer advice to somebody with a child with this.
That advice might not be great for a child.
Yeah. So maybe this, will help you. And if you are a patient or if you are a friend or if you're an adult with this disease or a child, this may be a little bit of help to you out there listening. So that's the hope. So let's talk about kind of what the doctor talked about was Dr. Wong. She came up and introduced herself and kind of did an overview of this disease to kind of kick things off. And she described the differences like why age matters when you're diagnosed, the history of IBD, what it is, types like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, treatment plans, medications, biosimilars, the measures of health, goals of therapy like remission.
And stopping biologics, which you shouldn't because it's not a cure.
Right. And then how goals for children, teens are different than for adults. So we're going to jump right into it. And we're going to start with the history of IBD that she went over. And again, we're not going to go too in depth on this.
No.
And it's been a little while since we saw it. So you might see some of this and be like,
oh my God.
I forgot, because these are all our notes. We took all these notes. So we have all of our notes so we could go over them with you guys. So we're just going to, I'm the note taker. And we're just going to kind of cover what she went over, maybe not go too in depth, but mention things that we think are important for you guys to know. And some of these we might try to reference our other episodes we've done that may go further into detail on some of these. So the first part that she talked about was the history of IBD and why age matters. So the age of disease of onset matters because pediatric IBD is not the same. Right. It is not. There's additional considerations in children, and it's usually a little more severe. And they have to consider growth and development, like bone development as well.
Kind of like what I've talked about before, when like steroids, because those aren't good for bone health or growing. And when you're a kid, you only have a limited time to grow. So like when you're an adult, you don't have to grow. You don't have to worry about growing. You have to worry about bone health a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not as bad. But when you're a kid and you're trying to grow and you have a certain amount of time, like when I was 11 and I was put on steroids, I didn't grow for like almost a year or so.
Yeah.
And so you really have to try to grow when you can, which is why steroids are not good for a pediatric.
Yeah. So that's why it does matter. Like if you were diagnosed when you were in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s versus being 10, 5 years old, 15, whatever it might be, it's different. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so it's just good to know. And then she talked about the natural history of IBD and started with Crohn's. And she said that it's an extension of the disease to other parts of the GI tract. And it can change from inflammation only, and it could lead to the development of strictures or fistulizing disease. It is progressive, so things can change. And like we mentioned, like Mason was just talking about, poor growth is part of it for these kids. And also the inability to obtain normal adult height or true height potential. So like what's interesting with Mason, we were given when he was younger, like everybody gets when you go to the pediatrician, they give you like a prediction of what their height will be. And you're like, okay, it could be there. You could be taller, it could be shorter, but they always have kind of a estimate. And so for Mason now, we're not quite sure what this will mean. He may reach the same height. As of right now, you are definitely slower in growth.
Hmm.
So he may end up being a little shorter than his true height potential would have been without this disease. It's hard to say. So we'll find out because you're turning 15 this
Yeah.
weekend. So, yeah. So he is at that age where he could either take off and grow a lot more over the next couple years. So we'll see what
If that happens.
happens. Yeah, but this part of this disease is characterized by poor growth and not getting to that height you could have gotten to had you been diagnosed even at the age of 20. It would
Yeah.
be different for you. And then she talked about with Crohn's, the risk for surgery increasing the need for surgical management. And usually it's 1 in 3 at 5 years from diagnosis will end up with surgery.
Hopefully that won't be me.
No, we just covered a whole we have a whole episode on surgery and IBD that goes more into this that is more in depth, but that is what she had mentioned. And then also the risk with cancer of developing from having Crohn's disease. And then she talked about the natural history, the continuing the natural history of IBD. She was
And
talked about.
ulcerative colitis.
Mhm. And that is, let's see, has extension of the disease from limited colon to the entire colon. So 3 out of 4 present with the entire colon involvement. And so that is ulcerative colitis. And it does have extra intestinal manifestations, like 1 in 5 involves joints or liver. So, like you have the joint
Hmm.
issues, and you did also have liver
Issues. Yeah.
problems as well. You also had colon problems too. So
Yes.
that could be tied to that too. So it is interesting when we look at these things.
How much they might all tie together.
Mhm, yeah, and how they might overlap. And so, yeah, so that is something that is also part of the ulcerative colitis and the journey with it. And for them, the risk of surgery, she had it at 5% at 1 year and 15 to 20% at 10 years. And then, like the surgeon had mentioned, which if you watch our other episode, that these percentages are probably going to be changing.
Because of all the new
Hmm.
biologics and
Yeah.
stuff.
So instead of
That's
having to go to,
exciting.
it is, instead of having to go straight to surgery, and to have another surgery later, they're helping get that inflammation under control with biologics.
Save your body parts.
Yep, that's the important thing with this. It is, that's the goal. It's one of the goals. And then the other, obviously, cancer is also part of that too. So these are all like kind of like the progression, how IBD can go with
Mhm.
each of these. And then she discussed the treatment plans and more about biologics. And so, like for them, they asked the question, how do we come up with a treatment plan? And so, their tactic at our hospital is to decide as a team together between like you and
Parents
us
and the
and the IBD
doctors.
care
Yeah.
team. Hmm. Yeah,
The
it's
nurses, the
like,
doctors,
so
everyone
it's
like
all a
that.
team, kind of a team effort.
Yes.
And they look at patient concerns and health goals. So, when they're determining the types of treatments, so they look at the risks and the benefits and they look at the disease treatment chosen based on your child's specific needs or concerns. So, like something they talked about was like schedules and fears, because those two things play a huge role for kids. A lot of kids are in public school where they are there every day. So, when you're looking at treatments, that
Those
is
are hard to.
something to consider.
Yeah, and you have to be like, well, now that day of school is now being they're not learning what they could have, and then it's being pushed to another day, and then on another day when they're trying to learn that, they don't have the teacher explaining to them,
Yeah.
so they're gonna have trouble learning
So then
it.
they could
So
have
yeah,
problems with school
so
because of
stuff
that.
kind of snowball.
Mhm. And then sometimes with fears, they understand, maybe infusions are too scary. Maybe there's an
Which I
injection.
can relate to.
Yeah, but you got over it.
Yes,
You did really well.
thank you.
And some things, maybe pills might be better, but maybe some kids can't take pills, and so
Infusions would be better.
they consider all of that
Mhm.
when they go to treat. I like that they are considerate of what the needs of the child are in multiple aspects. And then they talked about the medications and biologics, which we're not going to go into in depth. I'm just going to
Slightly
name them. Yeah. And so some of the ways that they treat it is like TNF blockers, IL inhibitors,
inhibitors, JAK
JAK inhibitors.
inhibitors, anti-integrin.
Yeah, so that's the one like you're on like Entyvio's anti-integrin and IL inhibitors like Stelara, and TNF blocker is that would be like Remicade or Humira, and I think the JAK inhibitors might be Rinvoq. I believe so, but those are the newer ones. The JAK inhibitors are a little newer. And then they mentioned biosimilars. And that is a big concern with a lot of you out there because you're on something that's working and then your insurance suddenly says, no, you have to take a biosimilar.
That biosimilar won't work, but it's cheaper.
Yeah, and that is the, temptation for insurance is to be like, "Ooh, can save some money." And the thing that they said with a biosimilar is it has to demonstrate interchangeability. And so when you're taking a biosimilar, so this is like to quote it, it says, switching between the reference product and the biosimilar product, there should be no increase in safety risks or decrease in clinical efficacy. So that's how they kind of have
Mm,
to prove it. And so supposedly
because
that's
biosimilar.
right, because it's not a bioidentical.
No.
It's similar. But so in order to be used, those are they have to pass those methods there. So yeah, no increase in safety risks or decrease in clinical efficacy.
That is,
And
you don't
then
want a biologic to increase in a safety risk. You don't want
no.
that to increase.
No, and so that makes sense. And then clinical data must demonstrate that the biosimilar product will produce the same clinical response in any given patient. And so, you're supposed to be pretty sure then, okay, well, so it sounds to me like if you're telling me to take this biosimilar, it's going to do exactly what the other one did and have the same safety risks and it won't cause me to flare. So that's essentially what it
It's cheaper.
that's it, right, and that's what it should do. The problem is with this is that biosimilars are not completely identical with the reference product, which is the original one like you might be taking. So consultation with providers are still needed is what they're saying. So our doctors are saying they follow along with this very closely because even though it is supposed to have the same results, not
Because
increase any safety risks or anything like that, they said that sometimes it does happen that it doesn't
it
work the
doesn't work.
same. And so, even though it's all been demonstrated and it's supposed to be, just like you with you're supposed to be able to go to 6 weeks from 4 weeks because of, scientific data, but you
Yeah.
defied the odds. And
You know.
right. So it's not always perfect. So even though it says like this should work like this, it might not. And that is where our doctors say they do give pushback if they're not responding. So our doctors don't let it slide that there is pushback and that you do fight for what works for you. So if you are not doing as well and you're starting to flare, not feeling quite as, then it's important that your doctor does help fight. And
You can't let yourself get worse because
then you have a
yeah,
bigger
and
problem.
then you have to find another biologic because you
So
might build up antibodies, which is not good.
yeah, it's a whole problem. I was kind of concerned with that because I'm thinking, what do they do? But no, they do. They said they do push back when necessary, and they do keep an eye on it. And then one of the things they talked about, and this is typical, is what happens when you go off medications or biologics. But as of right now, the recommendation is to stay
Stay on the biologic.
right. So if you're on something that works for you, consider it a lifelong treatment.
It's called a biologic, not a cure.
That's actually one of the things they talked about because IBD is not a temporary situation. Basically, when you go off of a biologic, then
You're not.
you're not cured.
Yeah. It's like I guess here's a good way to think about it. You put gas in your car. The car runs because you put gas in it. So you never put gas in it again because you put gas in
It's
it.
like,
And
oh, it
that
just
should
runs.
yeah, you have to always continue to feed it gas so the car will always run. So it's basically yeah.
That makes sense to
That
me. So it makes sense. I mean,
easily
obviously, yeah, and so that's kind of like what we found out with Mason. We had thought, well, when he goes into remission, he can come off of the medications. And they were like, no, that's not how it works. And it was like, oh, and then
really
that's when we
confused about it.
realized,
Yeah,
yeah,
I was crying in the room. I remember
mhm,
that.
yeah, you were really upset. I mean, who wouldn't be? It's like you thought, well, okay, I'll do this for a year. And
Get to
then
remission,
yeah,
and
and
it's
then I
like
get to remission, and it's like, "You met your goals, you did all this stuff," and they're like, "Yeah, you met your goal, but you have to keep doing it." And it was kinda then it started to sink in that the biologics are just a treatment,
like,
not a cure, and it's like, "Oh, so what's keeping you in remission is that biologic. So it got you there, but it's
yeah,
gonna keep you there." So that's the way to look at it now. There may be some of you listening out there who say, like, "I don't need a biologic," and we've discussed on other episodes, and there are different variations, different severities of this disease. And that's an important conversation between you and your doctor. So if you don't need biologics and you're doing something different, that is pretty cool too. But for us, with Mason, that's what it took and the commitment to stay on it. For him, he's not gonna be able to come off of it. So for his situation, And with what the doctors were talking about, it isn't recommended at this time to go off biologics if they're working for you.
Yes.
So that's what she was mentioning.
Basically, don't.
Yeah, because it is a chronic disease. Like she said, this is not something that just gets cured and you move on. It stays with you. So it's important to stay on the biologics if they're working for you.
And if you go into a flare, you might go out of control and
Mhm.
then you have trouble getting back on
Well,
to remission.
that's what the doctor had said, that once you come off the medications, you are more likely to flare.
Mm.
And like you just said, once you flare, then it's a whole new problem trying to get it back under control and not do more damage.
So basically, just don't go off of biologics if
Yeah.
you're in
If
remission.
they're
And if
working
they're
for you
working for you,
guys,
yes, stay on
yes,
them.
yes, be thankful that you found something that works and stick with it. And then they also talked about, and we discussed this in a different episode as well, but the measures of health and goals of therapy. So, like how to like get to remission, these kind of things that they talked about. And so they talked about how they measure the health of, like, say, someone like Mason or someone like you who's listening with this. So they will use a Pukai chart. And even though it was developed, like ulcerative colitis is in the name, the UC, because that's what the UC in the Pukai, which is PUCAI, that's what it stands for.
Yes.
But they said it is for both.
It
So
works for both. It's interchangeable. I
yeah,
actually use it every single time I go to the hospital.
you do. Every time we fill out, that's something he fills out. They also measure your quality of life. So they ask questions to see what your quality of life is like. So they're looking at the results from the Pukai, the quality of life that you're living. They also look at things like your CRP, which is taken in a blood test, and they look at the overall inflammation in your blood. And so we look at CRP, and then the calprotectin, which is another test.
Simple. Yeah.
Yeah, you can Google that.
Yeah.
I
Wait,
won't say
no.
too much. It's one of the things Masons like to talk about. But
Google it
anyways,
just right.
yeah. So the calprotectin test, which a very easy test, guy, nothing scary. So, anyways, but the calprotectin is also a good measure. We use that with Mason as well to determine inflammation. So that is something that a lot of you have probably done and continue to do to measure. And labs. So they also use labs as a measure of health, which you do labs every 4
We test
weeks.
things like hemoglobin, which is very important.
It's
One of the things like biologic levels,
Oh, your trough
levels,
levels,
yeah,
they can,
trough
yeah. That's not
levels.
always standard, but it
Yeah.
is important to do. So every once in a while, she'll run them to make sure that
To make sure nothing's being used
right.
up too fast.
And if your trough levels are lower, they'll also maybe run an antibody test to see if you're building antibodies. So it's important for them to look at that too. They also use endoscopy, which is like includes the colonoscopy as well. So it's that is another measure of health that they use, as well as imaging, like an MRI, MRE, that sort of thing. CAT scans, they can use those too as part of that. So those are all different ways that they measure the health with this disease. And it's interesting because yeah, you've participated in like all of those. And so yeah, it's like that's what they do. So
They're all so fun.
yeah, so a lot of you out there might be going, well, how do you know if you're in remission or how healthy you are? But all these things we just talked about are all part of that picture of seeing where you're at in remission, seeing how healthy you are. And they then
There's multiple
next
kinds of remissions too, which we talked about in another
that's
one of
you
our
know what?
episodes.
We did. We're about to talk about just touch on it here, but
Yes.
like Mason
If you
said,
want to find more detail about all the different kinds of remission, we have another video on it.
yep,
Probably.
pop it up in the video.
Yeah, okay.
So there'll be a link in the video here, if I remember to do that for you guys, so you guys can watch more details on remission. So they just mentioned the goals of therapy, which is remission, and they had a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid was symptom clinical remission, and so that's where like they use the Pukai chart and they ask you these questions, and then based on your score, and your symptoms, they can say you're not symptomatic basically. So that type of remission. The next level of the pyramid is lab remission. And so that is where they look at your stool, blood, everything like that. And so now if you have already achieved the symptom or clinical remission, now if everything looks good in your blood work, if everything is stable and all numbers are good, then you can now say you're in lab remission. The next level of remission, and these are climbing in order of like where you want to be. Obviously, it's not saying like clinical remission is bad, but that is the lowest level of remission. So you do want to get to lab remission. Then in lab remission, your next goal is going to be endoscopic remission. And that's where you have your scopes. And they can look at everything and say, okay, now, and you look good in your scopes. So now you've reached endoscopic remission.
Then the next,
The ultimate,
the ultimate
ultimate
goal.
level. Yeah, this is
This one's
like,
fun to get to.
uh-huh, the
Top
soup.
of the top is
Yeah,
histologic
yeah,
remission.
yeah. And that's a really hard one to reach, but that is the ultimate goal. And so symptoms are just part of the picture. And so you might be like, well, I'm feeling great, but you might have a calprotectin test that says otherwise. You might have, CRP scores, or your hemoglobin might be dropping. So symptoms are obviously taken into account for remission, but they don't tell the whole story. And so that's why it's important to get all those measures of health so you really do know what's going on inside your body. So because the thing that she mentioned is the better the remission, the lower the likelihood of flaring. So that's the goal. But often remission is not forever, as you know. Mason. It's unfortunately, the goal is definitely to have long periods of remission. Some people can have years of remission. So yeah, and I think a lot of people just the disease is still there. So being in remission is great, but it doesn't mean the disease is gone. And so every once in a while you get that reminder that, hey, still here.
Surprise, I'm here.
Yeah, like how great. You never left, did you? So yeah. So anyways, so there's 50% patients who have achieved remission within 1 to 2 years. And so deep remission. So Mason not, took a little bit longer.
Yes.
So there you're in that other 50. So it's just 1 and 2. Really, you have a 50-50 shot at being in the 1 to 2 years, or it might take longer. So kind of equal odds there. And the big thing that is really important to remind people is that in children and teens, just what we all talked about, those remission goals, like having, clinical remission, lab remission, endoscopic, histologic, those are all the goals of remission. However, with children, there's also more goals.
Yes.
So for an adult, that would be what we just talked about, that would be your
Just
goals.
those are just the main goals for being an adult.
Right. And that would be your goals as well.
Mhm.
However, the other things they look at for kids are being able to obtain final adult height and ideal bone health. So growth and bone health
If bone
are
health
also
isn't good,
measured.
that's not good. And if
Right.
you're not growing, that's also not good.
Yeah. And so that's something I think a lot of people, I see it a lot of times in the parents groups I'm in with parents who have kids with this disease. A lot of the questions they're asking and trying to get to remission. And it's like, you know, you always have to consider growth and bone health. And so you got to be really careful with kids. You don't want to rock the boat. If they are doing well and they're taking a medication that is working, then you're getting them to achieve those other areas that are important. And so a lot of times people with adults who have this, they don't realize that with kids, there's more goals and it's a little bit more difficult for these guys.
Like for instance, just for the goals for kids.
Mhm.
So say if you're an adult and there's a biologic that is kind of working, but you want to find one that works better. Because there's
Yeah.
probably one that works better.
Mhm.
You can go off the biologic you're on, and while you're looking for one that works, you can go on steroids, and the steroids will keep
Like
the
acts like a
disease at bay,
bridge.
kind of,
Mhm.
while you're looking for the other one. But when you're a kid, you can't you can't stay on steroids because it's gonna stop you from growing. It's gonna mess up your bone health, and then you might go into a flare because steroids can't do everything.
Right.
And then the steroid dose might go up, which
Yeah.
is not good. And
And it's hard enough to come off of it,
yeah.
like, to once you're on that stuff,
And
it's
then by
it's
the
a
time you've
process.
figured out that other treatments may not work, you might have gotten antibodies to the other one, and
Mhm.
it's just kind of an infinite little loop there.
Right. No,
Which
it's
is not
it's
good.
true. While they're kids, it is very important to find something that works to give them that advantage to fully grow. So, anyways, that was, like I said, we went over it pretty quickly because it was just, the overview of it.
Little cover.
But I hope a few of these things might serve as reminders to you guys. You might have heard a few things in here that just like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, or I didn't know that. And maybe there's some things in here you want to look into further, and you can check out other episodes because we did go more into detail on a lot of these. So that's basically it for today. We will be back after Mason's
Yes.
birthday. So
15.
yeah, he's gonna
Woo!
look so different. It's gonna be like totally different. And
Someday.
And so for his birthday, and maybe I don't know, maybe we'll do our next podcast on it again, but we are going to Club 33.
Yay!
So yeah, our friends were so kind to make reservations for Mason's birthday.
Thank you so much if you're watching this.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to be doing for his birthday. And he's feeling good because his flare is now
It
over.
was just that Club 33 magic, wasn't it?
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, we made plans and look what happens. And this week he was able to also, he spoke at a biopharma company in San Diego. So yeah, so he was able to do that and it was very cool. So maybe we'll talk more about that in another episode. Kind of like, I think that'd be exciting. So we'll save that. Yeah. So kind of a short episode today, but I think a helpful one and something we did want to make sure we wrapped up the whole IBD Rady's Day, finish it off. So that was it. That was our kind of our the end of that series. And next week we'll join you with something else. Maybe our stories on Club 33 Mace's birthday. We'll just share that with you guys. I think that might be fun. Yeah, I think that might be cool. So you guys, if you want to follow us on Instagram, we're on there at Team IB Determined. And you can also follow the Reggie Project as well. Encourage you to do that. And if you just want to find, if you want to listen to us on a podcast station, which you might be doing right now, you probably are listening on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or Apple Podcasts, or maybe YouTube as well. And
if you are on YouTube, there's also YouTube podcasts.
Yep.
But if you do want to watch us and hear us,
Mm-hmm.
go to YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to be notified every time we post a video, make sure to hit that bell icon.
Right.
It will turn blue.
Because there's this whole thing with the way YouTube is, you can subscribe and you may not get notified when we post something new. But if you want to make sure you're getting those notifications, click the bell and then you'll be able to know.
Well, and this wonderful channel posts a video.
Yeah. And hope we're giving you guys relevant information, things that are being helpful. Comment, let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to talk about, something different. We'd be more than happy to take any suggestions or hear you guys. That's about it, guys. Everyone, I hope you're having a good day, weekend, work week, school day.
Having a birthday, who knows?
Birthday? Yeah, I know. Yeah, like you. So yeah, let us know if it was your birthday too. If you're listening, I mean, this is gonna play around the years, so everybody should have birthdays when they're listening to this. So maybe just comment when it's your birthday.
When it's your birthday.
Just tell us. We'll say happy birthday.
Yeah, happy early birthday. Happy late.
Yeah, so not our Mason's birthday. We'll celebrate all yours all year. So if you're watching this episode and you've got to this point, it'd be pretty funny. Because people might be looking at the comments going, why is everyone saying it's their birthday?
This is why you should read the comments before watching the video.
Yeah, so watch the whole video.
Yeah. Watch the whole video.
And so that's about it. Anything else from you? Are you good?
I think that's about it.
All right. Then we will go ahead and sign off and we will see you guys next week.
In the next
episode. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you will stick around, tune in, and reach out to us with your own journeys. We are excited to give you an inside view of what it takes to be a caregiver and what it's like to be a patient.
And most of all, we hope you'll maybe be able to play something you hear on here that might help you in your own life. Sometimes life changes, and it's all about how you handle the journey.